Good to see everybody. I'm Danny from Skillshare. So excited to have you all here. Super excited to have you here, Lisa.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here today and to talk about brushes. I love talking about brushes, so can't wait.
Yes. All right, cool. I'm gonna just share a couple of opening slides on behalf of Skillshare, and then we'll get right into it. We're here for picking the perfect Procreate brushes with Lisa Bardot, top teacher here on Skillshare. This is gonna be a super interactive session. And before we dive in, Lisa is offering a Procreate brush sample pack. Here is the link. You can also just get the QR code. I'll leave it up for just another 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah,
And
you'll definitely want to get that because we're going to be using it to draw today. So definitely get that and add it to your Procreate. You should just be able to, once you download it, like it on your iPad, like tap it and it should import right into Procreate.
after going to that link, you'll just click the Buy Now button, and then you can just download the brush pack as well as Lisa's user guide. Any notes on what they should check out in the user guide, Lisa, or anything
Yeah,
like
the
that?
user guide just kind of gives you details about, what each brush is. There's also like in my user guides, I include some like brush properties. So like if it's, like a transparent or opaque brush or how it responds to tilt and pressure and things like that. And then like what brush set it comes from, because these are all brushes that come out of some of my Bardot brush sets. These are some of my favorite brushes, and I'm excited to use them with you guys today. And then there's also some like additional resources and other things that I do in that little guide.
All right, so diving in, what to expect for the live session today. Lisa's going to talk a little bit about her background making Procreate brushes, types of brushes, and when they should be used, when you can use them. And then we'll have a little draw along session. And at the end, I'll have time for Q&A. Probably just a handful of questions. So I'll just look for the most common questions or the questions that are most applicable to all of you. And we'll get to hear directly from Lisa. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Yeah,
So
my pleasure.
excited to be here with you guys today and talk about brushes. I love talking about brushes. But let me introduce myself first. I'm Lisa Bardot. I am an illustration artist and digital art educator. And I help people find their creativity through drawing on the iPad. And I do this by creating brushes and tools through my brush business, Bardot Brush. And I have a YouTube channel with over 200 videos and tutorials about Procreate. I also have been running this drawing challenge called Making Art Every Day, which provides daily drawing prompts, tutorials, and motivation to help you nurture your creative practice. I've been running that for 6 years ongoing, and we're still going strong. I'm very excited about what we plan for next month. And a couple years ago, I founded Art Makers Club, which is a joy-filled community and learning hub for digital art makers. I've been using Procreate for about 10 years, and I've been making brushes in Procreate for about 8 of those years. When I got started using Procreate, there were only the built-in brushes. That's all that was available. There wasn't like brushes you could buy or download or anything like that. But I knew that there was a particular look that I wanted in my art that I wasn't getting from the built-in brushes. So that's what prompted me to get started experimenting in Procreate's Brush Studio and making my own brushes. And I'm so thankful to Procreate for how easy it is to customize and create your own brushes. They made that really user accessible. You can just tap into any brush and you can play around with the brush settings and see what they do. And that's kind of how I started making brushes, just playing around with it. In 2016, I launched my first 3 brush sets, and I sell about 20 now on Bardot Brush. I'm actually working on a brand new one that I'm going to release next month. I'm really excited about that. And then I have about 12 brush sets through my Art Makers Club. I've made hundreds, if not thousands of brushes. I make so many brushes, like not even all of them that like make it to the final product. Lots of experimentation, but I always think of the brush studio as kind of like a playground to me. I love playing with the settings and just kind of seeing what kind of tools I can make. So today we are going to talk all about Procreate brushes. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through kind of some like brush types or categories, like what to look for in a particular brush for the different stages of your illustration. So we're going to talk about brush types. I'm going to talk about what to look for in a particular brush. And then together, we're going to do a little illustration. I have this really cute little snail illustration that we're going to do together. And we're going to be using brushes from that sample pack to do that. In the sample pack, there are 8 brushes, and there's one from every kind of category that we're going to cover. So you'll be able to kind of follow along with me and kind of observe those brush qualities in real time. So I'm very excited to get started. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and switch down to my iPad, and we'll get into it. Okay. All right. So, oops. Well, there's an illustration, but so we're going to start by talking about the different types of digital brushes. And so if you want to follow along with me and just like have fun making some brush strokes so you can observe those qualities, here's what I want you to do. We're going to go up to the plus sign to create a new canvas. And we're just going to choose the screen size. You know, you can use the screen size, or if you have a favorite size you want to do, but for this, it doesn't really matter. We're going to choose the screen size option. And then I'm going to teach you how to make this kind of like almost like a digital sketchbook. So you can have lots of pages that you can like experiment and make brush strokes and play around with. So once you got this open, we're going to go up to the actions menu, which is the little wrench. We're going to go to Canvas. And then there is an option for Page Assist. I want you to toggle that on. And when you do that, you'll see this toolbar at the bottom. And these are actually little thumbnails of the different like pages of your Procreate document. You can draw on a page, and you can tap new page, and you can draw on another page, and you can just add new pages as you kind of like run out of space, because you will definitely run out of space if you're following along with me. But just go ahead and start with one page like that. I am going to open up another document that I already created, which has some additional info in it, but it's the same kind of thing. So just add pages as you need, and you could follow along with me. So let's talk about the types of digital brushes. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So there's different, qualities in a brush that make it suitable to use for different parts of your illustration. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here. So let's start off with the first one, which is pencils and sketching brushes. So these are the brushes that you're going to use for, sketching, the construction of your drawing, or just planning out your art. And there are some things that we look for when it comes to a sketching brush. Pressure sensitivity is a really good thing. I'm actually going to pop over to the next page. So this is you guys, this is your blank page. I'm going to draw on mine, and it just has the title at the top, so you can follow along with me. I'm going to go to my colors, and I'm just going to choose black for my color. You choose a different color if you want. And then here I am in the Bardot brush sample pack. So it should look like that with a little sun on top. And I'm going to choose the sketching pencil from the sample pack. This is a brush from my pencil box brush set. So when it comes to pencil brushes, and for sketching, we're looking for a brush that when you use it with light pressure, you get really light, faint strokes like this. So you can do nice sketchy lines. And then when you use heavy pressure, you can do heavier lines like this. So that way you can refine your drawing by like drawing over your little light sketch lines with a heavier mark like that. And another cool quality in a pencil brush is tilt. So responding to tilt, when you hold it more upright, you get strokes like this. But when you tilt it to the side, you get kind of these cool, almost like a pencil. If you imagine shading with a pencil, that's exactly what this is meant to kind of replicate. And then, of course, like having a nice pencil-y texture doesn't hurt. It doesn't have to be a literal pencil brush to sketch with, but that's what I like. If you're looking at some of the built-in Procreate brushes, you can go into the sketching set. And 6B pencil and HB pencil are two of my favorites. I'll do 6B pencil. So that has like a really nice texture. You can also shade with it. It's a little bit more gritty. And then, of course, light pressure, heavy pressure, and everything in between. HB pencil, also in that set, is another one that you kind of play around with. Also has that shading capabilities, but definitely the, doing light and then a little heavier. This one, what is it? HB pencil. Light to heavy pressure isn't that different on that one. So I kind of actually prefer the 6B better. So you can kind of add some brush strokes and get a feel for what to look for in a sketching brush. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next category. Okay, so the next category is shape making and coloring brushes. So these are the brushes that we use to create kind of like the main base shapes of our illustration, or to color in large areas that we later on like add texture or whatever to. But this is kind of like after you do your sketch, this is the next step. So I'm gonna, some of the things that you look for in a brush like this are something that's really solid, that's kind of a solid brush with like an interesting textured edge, or an interesting texture to it. So I'm gonna go to this page and I'm gonna go into the sample pack. And the brush that I added for this category is called Inker. And this is from my basic toolkit. And if we use this brush, you can see it's a very solid brush, but it has like a nice textured edge. It's great for using with color drops. So if we draw a shape like this, that's a fully closed shape, we can grab the little color drop circle here, or the color picker circle, and drop it in the middle and then fill it with color. So it's really quick to make, areas of color that are fully filled in that we can then later add texture to, like that. Some other brushes that are good for this would be, let's go into the inking set, which is one of the built-in sets, and I like Studio Pen. This is just like a really very simple brush. If you want like a nice clean edge, you can do shapes with that brush. I like a little bit more texture, but in the drawing set, this brush called Blackburn, I love this brush. It's really fun. It's got a nice textured edge, but as you can see, you can draw shapes with it, and then you get this nice texture on your edge. So it just kind of depends on what like aesthetic you're going for. And then also like this one, Eagle Hawk, right here, also in the drawing set. This one has some texture in it. So if there's a brush you want to use for this like shape making process of your, stage of your drawing, and it has texture in it, like avoid using color drop, because if I use color drop on this one, that's not not too good. So if it's a brush that has texture, you can always just color it in by hand to make your shape like this. So those are some things to look out for when you're choosing a brush to kind of do those initial shapes in your illustration. Okay, let's go on to the next one. All right, so next is texturizing and shading brushes. So now we've drawn the main shapes. We're gonna add some texture and shading to our artwork to really bring it to life. So it's not just like flat color. So these are used for adding texture, shading, or highlights to flat areas of color. And for this type of brush, we're looking for texture, of course. So a brush that has a really interesting texture that matches the, the thing that we're drawing, or that matches the aesthetic that we're going for. And I usually look for brushes that have soft edges, kind of like this, that don't have those hard edges that like the shape making brushes do, and that have some really nice texture in there. So I'm going to go to this page and we can try out some texturizing and shading brushes. In the sample pack, I have a few actually, I put a couple in there. The first one is this crumple texture, and this is from my watercolor wonder set. It's a set of watercolor brushes. But this one has such a nice texture. So let's choose that crumple texture, and then you can add some strokes. You can also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but you can play with the brush size. And if you want like bigger texture, like I really love it really big, and then the stamps of the brush kind of overlay on top of each other. So that's really nice. I've got a brush called Press Fine from Texture Maker. So that's another one of my sets. It's all full of textury brushes. And so you can see I've got like soft edges on this one, and it's also pressure sensitive too. I'm going to go down with my brush size a little bit, but if I use light pressure, I get like a really kind of sparse texture, but if I use heavy pressure, it's a lot more dense. So that's really useful when it comes to shading. Maybe I need it darker over here, but lighter over here. So pressure sensitivity is going to be really useful. Another brush I have that could fit into the kind of like shading category or texture category is this Toothy Pastel. This is from my Artist Pastel set. I love that set. It's got so much great texture. I'm kind of out of room, so I'm going to add a new page by tapping new page here. And then I'll keep going. So this one has really nice texture, nice edge texture. Again, pressure sensitive. So if I do heavy, it's like that. So I really like that brush too. And then when it comes to like some of the default brushes, there are so many different brushes that you could use that would work for kind of this, texture part of your illustration. Let me see if I can remember which ones I was gonna pull up. Um, Gosh, there's so many. Oh, this one's fun. Aurora from the artistic set. That has kind of a fun texture. And this is like, if you're ever bored and you're not sure what to draw, like just open up your brushes and make marks. And it's a really fun way to like spend some time, but also to get ideas for like the ways that you can use brushes. Oh, the charcoal set. That's right. In the charcoal set, 6B compressed. That's a really nice one. It has some great texture. Again, pressure sensitive. So there's light and there's heavy. What else? In the, I think it's the, what is it? Vintage set or textures? Yes, in the textures set, there's this brush called Tessellated. I ran out of room again. We'll make a new page. And so maybe your texture is actually more of a pattern. That's a different way to use texture, like using a pattern brush, kind of like this one. So yeah, I definitely recommend kind of just look at this one. This is Dove Lake, also in that texture set. So there's a possibility that are literally endless when it comes to texture. It just kind of depends on what you're going for. Okay, well, let's keep going. Okay, so our next category is going to be painting and blending brushes. So these are when you want to blend and smear colors, they kind of mimic wet paint and they pull colors across the canvas. So if you're wanting to go for like a painterly kind of look to your artwork, also could be helpful for shading and things like that. You're going to want to, look for these painting and blending brushes. But those are some of the qualities that we look for is like that wet look that pulls color around. So let's go ahead and try some of those. In the sample pack, we have this soft shading brush. This is actually a brush that I created for my book, which I have right here. I wrote a book called Drawing Digital that came out last year. It's been just about a year now, actually. And in it, I used this brush in a few of the projects, but I wanted to bring this book up actually because I have this whole section about brushes, which goes into a little bit more detail about some of the stuff that you guys are learning with different brushes to try, and then like exercises to experiment with that type of brush. So if you want to check out the book, you can find it at bardotbrush.com/book. But I made that brush for some projects in the book. So this one is fun. So if you use light pressure, you can kind of see the smearing capabilities of it. If you use heavy pressure, you can see it a little bit more. And then the blending brushes are best to observe when you use multiple colors. So if you want to choose like a different color, you can go ahead and pick a different color from the color picker and then just kind of like see how the colors pull around with different amounts of pressure. Get some different colors in there and just kind of see how that goes. But let's go ahead and try some of the built-in brushes too. So let's go into the painting set, and we're going to choose Old Brush is a good one. So, or actually, no, let's do Old Paint. I don't think everybody has Old Brush. So go ahead and choose Old Paint. And then this one's really cool. It's got this really dry texture. And you can see how it's very like smeary and draggy. I'll go back to black and kind of mix some of that in. So this would be like a painterly kind of painterly or blending brush. Turpentine, that's right below that. It's another one that's very dry, just has kind of a different texture, or very wet. It's wet but dry. It's like a dry brush, but it's like a wet kind of, the qualities of the brush. So yeah, those are painty and blendy brushes. They're really fun. The brush that I mentioned that I'm working on that's coming out next month is all painterly brushes that have these like really blendy qualities. I'm really excited about it. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, so we're getting towards the end here. The next category is line work and detail brushes. So this is kind of like when you're getting towards the end of your illustration and you're just adding those last finishing details, or maybe if the line work is a feature of the illustration, like if you think of like comic art where the lines are kind of, it's like almost like coloring book style, where it's the lines with color inside of them. These are great brushes for that. So you can use it for fine details, final touches. They're great for precise line work or small scale textures. When it comes to line work and detail brushes, we're looking for a brush that works well at a small size and that has an interesting texture. And then pressure sensitivity is also really useful for a brush like this. So let's go ahead and try one of those out. In the sample pack, I have a brush called Gritty Tilt Liner, and this one is from my gouache paint box. And gouache paint box and basic toolkit are actually two of the first brush sets I ever released, and they've been updated multiple times since then. But this Gritty Tilt, whoops, is one of my favorite brushes. I use it a lot, and it has such a fun texture. So the tilt on this brush, if you hold it upright, you get a really solid line, but if you kind of tilt your brush, you get more of a gritty line. So that's where the name comes from. But like, if I want to add like final details to my illustration, I just love the texture of this. And then to get lines kind of like this that taper on the end, you just kind of use like lighter pressure at the end of your stroke, and that will add a really nice quality to your line work. So I try to do a line brush that kind of has that pressure sensitivity. Let's think, what kind of brushes for that? Let's do the calligraphy set. And we have this brush called Shale brush. So Shale from the calligraphy set. And this brush, it could be very large like that, but if we're thinking about using it as a line work or detail brush, we're going to take the brush size down on the slider over here. And now that would work. So some brushes might be kind of like double duty, like it could work well as a shape making brush and a line work brush, just depending on how big you have the brush. So that one's Shale. What else is a good one? Oh, sorry, okay, I think in the drawing set, yeah, in the drawing set, Little Pine has an interesting texture. Again, you want to keep your brush size really small for like line work, but I think that has like a nice, almost like watery kind of quality to it. You know, and like any brush could probably work really well for this if you keep it at a small size. So definitely play around in the ink set. Oh, there's one, Inca. This one, I really like the texture on this one. So Inca from the inking set has a really nice kind of like dry texture to it. And it's pressure sensitive. So that's a really nice one for line work as well. Okay, one more category to cover, and this one is specialty brushes. So these are brushes that were created to produce a very specific visual or lighting effect, a pattern, a stamp. They were created for a specific purpose to create a specific thing. That's why they're kind of like specialty brushes. But you don't have to write them off as like, it can only do this one thing, because you can still use them in really creative ways. So let's take a look at some of the specialty brushes. In our sample pack, we have the combed brush, and this is a brush from my Fur and Fluff brush set. I have a class on Skillshare called How to Draw Fur in Procreate, and I have this whole set of brushes that were brushes that I made specifically to kind of like help with the process of drawing fur, because fur, if you were to do it by hand with just like a liner brush or something, you're drawing a bunch of fur. But this one kind of has multiple lines of fur or hair like built into it. So I'm going to go a little bigger with my brush size. So I like to use this brush with kind of like these little curvy flicking motions to look kind of like fur, like that, or hair. And then there's other brushes in this set that kind of do like light or dark and help you with the shading of drawing fur. But those are all very specialty brushes that are meant for specifically drawing fur. And that you get this brush set as a part of that class as well. So let me see from the built-in brushes. In the luminance set of the built-in brushes, these are all very specialty brushes. They were made to create like different lighting effects. So a brush like Light Pen is going to work better with the lighter color. So if I go to like a yellow or lighter color like that, you'll start to see what that brush is. It looks kind of like neon, where it like has this glow around it and it's like really bright. So there's another one that's kind of like an orange color. What other fun specialty brushes? In the vintage set, we have this like disco brush, which is like, this brush is cool because it has color dynamics built into it. So each stamp of the brush, so each one of these is a different color. And one thing I haven't mentioned so far is like what's around me here on my around my iPad. These are actually stamp shapes and textures that I use to make my Procreate brushes. Every Procreate brush is made up of a stamp shape. So for in this example, this like retro little circle thing is the stamp shape and a texture. And so you can see the texture in that stamp. So this is an example of a texture over here. And then you take those two things and combine them with all the like literally limitless kinds of settings that you can like play around with to create the effect that you want. So that's kind of how a Procreate brush works. That's how they're made. So yeah, that's specialty brushes. So now that we've kind of talked about the different categories of brushes, what to look for in a brush kind of for each of those categories, we're going to put all of that into practice by creating an illustration together. And we're going to go through all those different steps to create our illustration. So let's go ahead and do that. Do we have any questions that came up so far? Are we doing good? How are we doing, Danny?
We're doing great. We have a couple questions if you have a moment to answer
Yeah.
them. One was, how do you, what's the best way to swatch brushes to get used to them? I was,
Um,
no,
I
yeah.
think if it's something like what we're doing right now, I don't know if that's exactly what you mean, but to like go through and just see what like I was saying before, like a really good exercise is to even just pick a single brush and to see how many different brush strokes and marks you can make with it. It's called mark making. It's something that artists do with any tool. Like if you're a painter, you go through the mark making process, see all the ways that you can use that one tool. So that's a good suggestion. So you can, write the name of the brush at the top of your canvas and then just go to town mark making. Like you literally might fill up multiple pages just with one brush if you get really creative with it. You can also experiment with the opacity of the brush, which is how light or how like transparent or opaque it is right here. So yeah.
Cool. That's helpful. And then somebody asked what do you have like a brush that you like to use specifically for trees or nature? Like do you have go-to things based on what you're drawing, basically?
It really like when I'm choosing what brush set to do for whatever it is I'm drawing, it more depends on the like aesthetic and style that I want versus like the thing itself. If you're trying to do like a realistic tree, you might choose a different brush set than if you're trying to do like a stylized, almost like cartoony tree with like line work and texture and things like that. So it really depends on the look you're going for. That's kind of how I decide what brushes to use for an illustration.
Got it. That's helpful. Yeah, it depends on the
Yeah.
style. And then
Yeah.
one last question, and I'll save a few more that we have for the
Mhm.
end. What's a good setting? Well, there's a bunch of questions about the Apple Pencil. One person asked,
Mhm.
like, how often do you change your brush? And a second person asked, what's a good setting for their pencil? They're a beginner and trying to figure out like how hard they need to press. Yeah, do you have
Yeah.
suggestions for settings for the pencil and kind of like pencil name?
Well, there's not necessarily a setting for the pencil. Like there's not a lot that you can change in the pencil. Um, But I will say there's a couple things I'll say about that. One is that your ability to control the pressure of your brushstroke is a skill that you can build over time. It's like muscle memory. So me being able to say like I want it light here and then I want it dark, but then I want it to go light, that's the skill that I've built up over time. So another fun exercise is you're like getting to know your brushes is to like do some pressure practice where you're trying to control exactly how much pressure you're using. And the more you draw, the better you'll get at this. There is another thing in Procreate here in the actions menu, preferences, pressure and smoothing. There's this curve. And if you grab this curve and pull it up or down, it's going to affect the pressure sensitivity of the whole app. So if you pull it down, your strokes will be a lot lighter than maybe if you're really heavy-handed, that might be a good one. Or you can press it up, oops, push it up and kind of just experiment with that. And you can also turn on stabilization for the whole app. So if you have a really shaky hand and you want help with that, you can turn that option up as well.
Awesome. That's super helpful. There's a couple
Yeah,
more, but let's keep rolling and I'll save some of
cool.
them later.
All right, so let's go back to the gallery view. You just tap gallery here, and we're gonna go ahead and create our illustration now. We're gonna be creating this cute little snail illustration, and we're gonna be going through the different like categories, and you're really getting a chance to see like what a drawing workflow is. And a workflow is just like, how do you get from like start to finish, like what are the steps you go through? And so this is an example of a drawing workflow that I use a lot. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and tap the plus sign to create a new canvas. And the canvas size that I'm gonna use today is 2800 across 3500 pixels down. I have a template saved for that, but if you don't, you can tap this little rectangle here, the one with the two little rectangles, and then tap down here into pixels. And then you're going to type in 2800 by 3500 pixels. DPI doesn't matter because we're setting up our canvas in pixels. And then you can give your canvas template a name. And then you tap create, but I already have one saved, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and just tap my template. Okay. So we are going to start our drawing workflow, our illustration out with a sketch. So we're going to choose a sketching brush. Let's go to our brushes, and we're going to be working from the, the sample pack. But if you had technical difficulties and weren't able to download it, you can use some of those brushes that I suggested when we were doing, all the like brush play. So let's go ahead and choose sketching pencil for our sketch. And then for a sketch, I usually just use black. You can use black or gray. If you want it to look more like pencil-y, you could choose gray, but I usually choose black. So we're gonna do some basic shapes to kind of like start our sketch, and then we're gonna refine them into their final shapes. So remember how I said we can do light pressure and then we can do heavy pressure. That's kind of what we're gonna be doing. So we're gonna start by drawing our snail's back, or like the shell, not the back, the shell. So we're gonna kind of sketch a circular shape like this, and it can be really light like that. And it's okay if it's really messy, like that's fine. So we're just gonna start with that circle, and then we're gonna add the body. So we're gonna draw the bottom of the snail. It's gonna be like a line kind of like that underneath. So a straight line underneath. And then the head is going to kind of curve up like this, and then curve around to make the head. And then it's going to kind of taper outward so it meets up with the shell. So see how it's like a tapered shape like that. And then taper all the way back down to the tail. So we have this sort of like boomerang kind of shape for our snail. Okay. And now we're going to, I'm going to actually move it over. I kind of ran out of room there. So if you ever like need to like move stuff over, you can go up to the transform tool here, which is the arrow, and then you can just move it, make it a little smaller. Okay. So I'm also gonna, on my little snail, I'm gonna add some antenna. I think they're called the antenna. The little antenna on the snail, and then little, and so, okay. I've done tutorials on snails and I always comment on this, but these are like the eyes, but we're giving it a face down here. So don't come at me if this is not an accurate snail. It's just a fun illustration. Okay, so we have our like kind of basic circle here that we sketched in lightly. Now we're going to kind of go over it with a little bit heavier marks to kind of make the final shell shape. So first of all, I'm going to draw a line that kind of goes down a little bit more straight to have the like front of the shell, and then kind of a little round spot like that for the bottom, that kind of like opening. Move that up just a little bit. There we go. And now we're going to draw the swirl. So you can kind of sketch that in lightly to start. Draw your little swirl. And now that we've kind of sketched in lightly, we can kind of go over it and make sure these are kind of going to be our final shapes for our final illustration. So I kind of go over a little heavier pressure like that. It can still be a little messy and sloppy because this is just the sketch. So this is not the final artwork. So there's a little snail shell, and you can also go over your body if you want, a little heavier. At this point, if you wanted to add like little wiggles or add, you know, I'm doing the body kind of like with these straight lines, but you can add more curves and things like that. So there's our snail, and we're gonna give him a little face. So I'm gonna draw a couple little eyes like that. And then I thought it would be cute to give him glasses. So you can kind of sketch a couple big circles. I kind of want them really big. So I'm gonna go over that again. Zoom. I always like to zoom out a little when I'm zoomed in to make sure I like how it's looking. So there's a little glasses and then a little smile. It's a cute little face. Make this one a bit bigger. That's why we sketch lightly, so we can refine and make changes at this stage in the drawing. So there's our little snail. Our snail's going to be sitting on sort of a surface, like on grass. So we're going to just sketch in a little oval, kind of like this. You can always go over it. Once you do it lightly, go over it heavier. Make sure you like that shape. So there's a little surface for the snail to be sitting on. And then we're going to add some little mushrooms. So the mushrooms, I'm going to draw like a big curve line here and then sort of like a dome over the top. Again, I'm doing light sketchy lines. And then I'll do another littler one over here, kind of like that. And then I do want to do one over here, but again, I think I'm running out of space. So I'm going to use my transform tool to kind of shrink it down a little bit. And when you're resizing like this, you want to make sure you're in uniform mode. If you're in freeform mode, it's going to mess you up. So make sure you're in uniform. Okay, and then I want a little mushroom down here. Okay, and so now I'm going to kind of refine these shapes a little bit, go over them one more time. These are going to be my final shapes. And of course, I need little stems, so we'll do that next. So I'll start with this little one down here. And it's going to kind of have like this tapered stem. And then I'll do like a curved bottom. So that one's kind of sitting on the grass. And then these ones are just going to go behind the snail. I kind of want this one to be a little bigger. So if you want to adjust, like during the sketching process, if you want to make adjustments to just a part of it, you can go to the selection tool, which is this little S, freehand mode, and draw a circle around it like that. Then go to transform and you can decide to rotate it or adjust it however you want. Okay, and now we're going to add the stem. So I want to make sure the stem comes out the center. So I'm just going to draw a light line and then I'll kind of draw like the tapered stem shape around that. So that way I make sure my stem is like centered. Okay. Actually, I'm going to make this one kind of go over this way a little bit more. It's always best to make these kind of adjustments in the sketching process because it's a lot, it can be damaging to the quality of your artwork to move things around after you get to the final art because of pixelization and things like that. So I like to do it at this stage. So there is our little sketch. And now we're ready to move on to color. So we're doing good so far, Danny?
We're doing great. Yeah.
We're going to move on to the shape making process, our stage of our illustration. So when we're ready to move from our sketch to that part, we're going to go up to our layers. We're going to reduce the opacity of our sketch by tapping this little N and then moving the opacity slider down so that it's like just visible. So it's going to be a guide as we create our final artwork. And then we're going to go ahead and create a new layer by tapping this plus sign. And we're going to move this layer underneath our sketch. I always keep the sketch layer on top. So we're going to tap, hold, and drag it underneath the sketch. And now we're ready to do the shape making part. But first, I'm going to set my background color of this illustration because that's going to be helpful for the color selection process. So to set your background color, you're in your layers here, and you're going to tap background color. And the color I'm going to choose is going to be like a soft peachy color. So I'm over here in kind of like the reddish orange color. And then something like really light, maybe a little more red. So color kind of like this. So I'm all the way up there. So a nice light color. There we go. Okay. And now we're going to choose a shape making brush to do our shapes of our illustration. So we're going to go up to our brushes and choose the Basic Toolkit, the inker brush from Basic Toolkit. This is a nice kind of semi-solid edge with a little bit of texture to it. So I think it'll be nice for this. So go ahead and choose that brush. And we'll start by doing our little snail body. And I have to choose the color of the snail. I'm actually going to start with the background color. So you can put a finger down to kind of sample the background color like this. You'll see it's now in your color picker. And then I'm going to choose a color that's like a little bit darker than that. I like to do a swatch so I can see how the two colors are working together. I think that's too light, so I'm going to go a little bit darker. This again is the inker brush from the Basic Toolkit. You can try Studio Pen from the inking set. Any of these inking brushes will probably also do good at that. Okay, so I think that color is good. So I'm going to go ahead and draw. I'm basically going to outline the snail body. And I like to try and do it in one stroke if I can, but you can always start and stop if you need to. Just kind of try and do it like that. And then we want to make a completely closed shape like this. So that way we can fill it with color drop. So make a completely closed shape and then drag the color picker circle in and you can fill that with color drop. Okay. Go a little lighter, actually. There we go. So I just chose a slightly lighter color and then I like filled that in again with color drop. And then for the little antennae, what's great about this brush is it has pressure sensitivity. So light pressure is a smaller brush stroke, and then heavier pressure, it's a bit bigger. So if we're doing something like these antennae, I can use that to my advantage. So starting at the top, doing light pressure, and then kind of heavier pressure towards the bottom gives me this nice tapered kind of line for my antenna. And then I can add little circles on top for the eyes, but not eyes, because the eyes are down there. Okay, so now we're going to do the shell. So basically at this shape making process, we're just going through and adding, drawing all the main shapes. So we're going to, anything that kind of like touches another shape, like the shell touches the body, we're going to put on a separate layer. So we're going to go up to our layers panel and we're going to tap the plus sign to create a new layer. And now we're going to choose a color for our shell. I'm going to do kind of like a blue color like this, but like something really like dusty. That feels even too bright. So you kind of experiment. I always do that. I think that looks pretty good. You, of course, can do whatever colors you want for yours, but these are the colors I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to outline my shell like that and fill that in with color drop. Maybe go a little dustier. There we go. And now I've done the shell, so I'm gonna do my mushrooms next. So let's go ahead and we're gonna create a new layer. Tap the plus sign to create a new layer. And since the mushrooms are behind the shell, we need to move that layer behind the snail. So I'm just gonna tap, hold, and drag that all the way to the bottom. And so we create a new layer, we've moved it underneath all the other layers, and now we're gonna do our mushrooms. So for colors, I'm going to do like kind of a creamy color. So I'm going to go over here into like the kind of warm colors, oranges, and choose like a really light kind of creamy color. Doing a little swatch helps. Make sure it's not too light or dark for the background. And then let's do the stems first. So go ahead and draw the stems. We're going to put the caps on a different layer, so don't worry about those. But I'm just, instead of using color drop this time, I'm just coloring it in by hand. If it's a small area, you know, sometimes it's just faster to do it that way. So that's good. And then this guy, go ahead and actually draw the bottom of that one like that. And then I'll color that in. Okay. Oops, missed a spot. There we go. Okay, so there's our mushroom stems, and now I'm going to create one more, well, not one more, another layer to do the cap. So we're going to tap the plus sign. This layer should be right above the stem layer, if you were on the stem layer when you made it. And now we're going to draw the caps. So just trace around the outline and then fill them in with color drop. And this little guy down here. Okay. All right. So we've done just about everything except for our little surface that the snail is sitting on. I could use this brush to do it, but because it's grass and it has, you know, a specific kind of texture, I don't think this like solid edged kind of brush would be the best fit. So I'm going to do a different brush for this surface. But first, let's create a new layer. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to tap the plus sign. And this layer needs to be under everything else because the mushrooms are on it, the snail is on it, it's got to be at the bottom. So we're going to move it all the way down. Okay. And then for colors, I'm going to do kind of like a really kind of warm green, almost like in the yellows here, kind of like a chartreuse color. Maybe a little darker than that. So color kind of like that. That's good. So yeah, like I was saying, I don't want to use this solid brush because I think having a little bit of texture for this surface would be more appropriate. So you don't have to have like a solid brush. You can choose different brushes to make your shapes. In fact, we're going to use this toothy pastel from my artist pastel sets to do this kind of grass texture. And I think it's nice to have a mix of textures in your illustration as well. So for this toothy pastel from the sample pack, I'm going to do kind of, and my brush size is all the way up for this one. I haven't mentioned the brushes sizes, but I'll try to. So I'm going to do kind of like light pressure around the outline so I get all that good texture. If I do heavy pressure, it's a little bit more solid. And then I'm going to color it in by hand, kind of leaving the edge like more textured, not color over it too much. So I'm using a little bit heavier pressure now. And then the cool thing about this brush is if you guys zoom way in, you might see this. If you go light pressure over an area that you've already colored in, you start to get even more texture within the color. It has burnt edges, what's called in Procreate, but I just called them like visible brush strokes. So you can add texture right into that shape with that brush, which is really nice. We've kind of finished up the shape making process and now we're going to move on to texture. And while we're still on this, and texture and shading kind of at the same time, we're going to add a little bit of shading to, we've added a little texture to this grass. Now we're going to add a little bit of shading to it. So I'm going to go to my color picker and choose a color that's just like a bit darker. So I'm kind of going this direction in the color picker, darker and more saturated. And then I'm going to use that same brush to kind of add a little shadow under my snail like this, like right underneath. And then I'm going to choose an even darker color and add a little bit smaller shadow, like right under it. There you go. So now we've got texture and shading under our snail. And now we're ready to add texture to everything else. So if we go to our layers, we're going to use a feature called Alpha Lock to add texture to everything. So what Alpha Lock does is it locks the shape that we have, so we can only draw within the shape. So we're not going to get our texture like flying everywhere. It's just going to be within the shape. So we're going to turn on Alpha Lock on all these layers. There's two ways you can do it. You can tap on the layer, and from the menu, you can choose Alpha Lock right here. Or you can take two fingers and you can swipe to the right like this. So I'm swiping to the right on all these layers, the shell, the snail, the mushroom caps, and the stem. And you'll see there's like a checkerboard pattern in the thumbnail. And that means that Alpha Lock is on. So now I can only draw, oops, I can only draw within that shape and not over here. So that's going to be really helpful for adding texture to our piece, to our illustration, which is another reason why we have all these things on separate layers. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding texture to the, let's start with the shell. We'll do the shell right now. Actually, let's do the body. We're going to choose the body layer, And for the brush, we're going to use this crumple texture brush to just add kind of like a base texture to this. So it's not just like flat computer color. So we're going to choose that crumple texture brush from the sample pack. And then we're going to sample our body color. So we have it here in the color picker. And then we're just going to choose a color that's just a little bit darker, just a little bit. So that way you can see the texture. Go a little bit darker maybe so you can really see it. My brush size, I'm going to go at around 20% maybe. And then I'm just going to lightly brush some of this texture on. So now instead of being that flat, you know, kind of computer color, we have a little bit of texture to it. So there's that. And we're going to do that for everything. So I'm going to go to the shell. So we're going to go to the shell layer. And I'm going to sample that blue color. And then choose a color that's a little darker. And then I'm going to maybe go a little bit bigger with my brush. Maybe a little bigger. Just depends on how you want the texture to look, how big the brush is. So I've added like a really subtle texture. And then I can actually, on the shell, I can kind of do a little more heavier towards the bottom because I can add a little shading, and it can even go a little darker with my color. Just add a little bit of darkness down there because it's like a rounded shape, so it might have a little shading. We'll add a little bit more shading in a different way, but that's kind of just like some base shading. And then let's do our mushroom stems. So we're going to go to the layer with the stems. Sample our color here. And then choose a color that's a little bit darker. Just apply a little base texture. And then we can, just like we did the shell, we can add a little bit of shading under here. Maybe get a little bit darker color because it would be a little bit dark under these mushroom caps. So we'll add a little bit of shading like that. Okay. And then for our mushroom caps, we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and choose the layer with the mushroom caps. And for the final illustration, I actually want these to be like a red color. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start by sampling my background. That's always a good way to kind of like choose colors, is to choose something from your illustration and then like a variation on that. So I'm choosing the background, and then I'm going to get like kind of like a dusty red color. Something like that. And then I'm actually going to switch brushes too. So we're going to go to our brushes and we're going to go back to that artist pastel. Another way to keep your drawing unified is to kind of repeat the textures you use in other parts of your illustration. So go ahead and choose that toothy pastel. And then we're just I'm going to make my brush size all the way big, maybe a little dustier. And then I'm just going to go over the whole mushroom, kind of like leaving some of the white, but not a lot. I want to color it in pretty well, but leave some of the white visible so it has a nice texture. So I'm going to do this one. So I'm just kind of coloring over it, not super heavy pressure, maybe like light to medium pressure, like that. Way to get that texture in there still. There we go. And then once you've kind of covered all of these with that color, we're going to add a little bit of shading too. We're going to choose again a color that's darker, more saturated. We're going this way. And we're going to add, just on one side of the mushroom to make it appear curvy, a little bit of that darker color. So just kind of on this side. And you could, however much shading you want to add, you could go one more step, go a little bit darker, and just on the very edge, add a little bit even darker there. Just kind of depends on how much you want to have. Okay, so we've got a little bit of shading happening there. Let's go back and add some more shading to our shell. So we're gonna actually go ahead and select your shell. And we're going to stick with our toothy pastel. And I'm going to sample my shell color and then go a little bit darker. I think that's pretty good. You can see how dark I went on that. And then we're going to just add a little bit of shading to the bottom here, like that. And then kind of like anywhere the shell kind of like curves, and it's like the underside of the curve, if you can imagine, we're going to add a little bit of shading. So Adjust your brush size if you need. I'm going to add to the bottom of this kind of curve a little bit. To the bottom of this kind of curve, like that. And then the underside of like the bottom of this kind of curve here. So it's going to be right there. And then I'll probably pull a little shading here on this side as well. Just really subtle. So now we're starting to have a little bit of shape. It doesn't look like a flat object. It's starting to have a little bit of dimension because of the shading. Okay. Other little things of shading we might want to do is here under the shell, where the shell touches the snail's body. So go ahead and select your snail body layer. Select that color with the eyedropper, and then we'll choose a darker color, darker and more saturated. And then we'll use that same brush to kind of add a little bit of shading, so that way the shell doesn't look like it's floating. Looks like it's actually sitting on the snail's body. And then also, while we're doing that, let's add a little shading down at the bottom of the snail too, because it would be a little dark on the underside of the body where it's touching the ground. So you can add a little shading down there. Okay. Alrighty. I think I might actually add a tiny bit of shading to the stems. So because these big caps will be casting a big shadow down. So I'm going to go ahead and select that layer with the mushroom stems. You kind of end up bouncing around between things, but so far I'm trying to keep it all, let's do all of one thing at one time. So I'm choosing a darker color, add a little bit more shading, I've kind of like established an imaginary light source coming this way. That's why I'm kind of keeping all my shadows on this side. So you kind of want to stick with that for your illustration. Make sure you kind of keep that imagined light source in mind when you're deciding which side to add the shadows on. Okay, so that's all of our shading and texture. Oh, one more thing for texture. I want to texturize our background just a little bit so it like has some texture to it as well. So we're going to go ahead and tap the plus sign to create a new layer. And we're going to put this layer behind everything else. So underneath the grass layer. And then we're going to sample our background color. And you guessed it, choose a color that's a little bit darker. And then we'll do the crumple texture brush for the background. I'm going to make my brush size really big, all the way up, I think. And then just lightly kind of add some texture like that. Maybe I went a little too dark. You can always adjust. Okay, there we go. I just want like a nice subtle texture so it doesn't look all computer perfect. Okay, so we got a little bit of texture on the background. All right, so we've done our sketching, we've done our shapes, we've done our texture and shading. Now we get to move on to the final details of this piece. So let's go ahead and we're going to need some line work to kind of show the curve in the shell. We need to do the face. We're going to add some fun little details to the stems and the body and maybe some little grass. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Okay. So let's start with the face of our snail. So I like to do my line work on a layer separate from all the other layers if I can. So I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to tap the plus sign to create a new layer. And this is what I'm going to use to do my line work and detail. Let's start by doing the face. I'm going to do kind of like a dark brown color for the eyes and mouth. So I'm just kind of here in the reds, choosing like a dark brown. And we are going to use that gritty tilt liner to do all of our line work, and that's going to give this piece a lot of great texture. So I'm going to do the eyes. I might need to adjust my brush size a little bit. That's 16%. So I'll just draw in the eyes and the mouth like that. And then I'm going to do the glasses. And remember how I said if you can reuse colors in an illustration, it's going to help it feel unified. So I'm going to choose this kind of a reddish color, maybe the dark one here. I'll sample that and I'll use that to do the glasses. So I'm just tracing over my sketch to add these details. That's why I still have that sketch layer turned on. So cute. Love it. And then another fun little detail that I want to add, actually, I'll come back to that. I want to do the shell. So let's go ahead and move on to doing the shell details. So for the shell, I'm going to do, let's see, I'm trying to decide if I want to do it all on the same layer. Let's go ahead and just do it on the same layer. Actually, let's not. Okay, select your snail layer and then tap the plus sign so you have a layer right above the shell. Okay, we're going to use a clipping mask, which is kind of like Alpha Lock, where you can only draw within the shape, but it's on a separate layer. So if you tap this new layer we created, you can choose clipping mask from the menu. And you'll see this little arrow. It'll kind of shift over and there's an arrow. So whatever we draw on this layer, you'll only see it if it's within where this shell shape is. Okay, so that's how clipping masks work. It allows us to keep things separate on layers, but still have those kind of like Alpha Lock qualities. All right, so let's go ahead and choose this kind of like darker shading color that we've already used. And I think we probably need to go a little bit darker than that even. So I'm just going to go darker and more saturated. And this is going to be my line color for the shell. And so I'm going to go just kind of trace the line on my sketch like that. So now we have some, definition to our shell. And then I'm also going to use the same brush and color to add some little, I'm going to go a little bigger with my brush size, 25%. These are going to serve as kind of like almost like contour lines that give the shell some shape, but also some like nice detail. So I'm just drawing like two lines that kind of come out of the same point and kind of curve around the shell like that. I like to rotate my canvas a lot when I work. Makes it easier to see what I'm doing and easier for you to see what I'm doing as well. So I'm just going to go around the whole spiral and add these little two lines. And I keep going all the way down. As I get closer to the center of the shell, these lines can kind of get a little closer together. Almost there. Okay, so now we have some nice details on our shell. So you might notice down here where this line kind of goes into this dark area of the shell, it gets kind of lost. And when I'm doing certain details like this, I might use a blend mode to do that. So if you actually go to your layers onto this, clip mask detail layer for the shell, tap the N, and then we have this list of blend modes. I'm not going to get into what blend modes are completely, but it has a darkening effect, which is going to be useful. So if we go to multiply, this is the one that has the darkening effect. It darkens everything on the layer underneath. And then we can adjust this opacity slider so we can get it to the right color, like lightness and darkness that we want. But now, even though it's darker down there, we can still see our lines. So that's kind of the benefit of doing, using the blend mode to do some of your details. Okay. And then let's add some other fun little details to this. I'm going to create a layer. I'm going to tap the shell layer and then create a new layer. I like to use a lot of layers, you guys. And because it's between a clip mask layer, it's going to become a clip mask itself. And then I'm going to choose like a lighter blue. So I'm going to sample this color and do a lighter blue like that. And then these are just kind of like a fun artistic choice, like these little kind of dashes to add a little bit even more texture and personality to the piece. So I'm just kind of going along the whole shell and in between these lines, adding these little dashes. It brings even more texture, especially because this brush is so textured. I love a piece with lots of texture. Okay, kind of keep going. I'm gonna add a few more of those. Okay, you can add as many of those as you want, but I'll just add a few for now. And then because, again, to keep things unified, we can do something similar on our snail. You can just choose the snail layer and we'll just do it right on that layer just to keep things simple. But I'm going to choose the snail layer and then sample his body and then go a bit darker like that. And then add some of those lines on him as well, like that. These little details are like what give, a piece its signature style. Like this is not what a snail looks like. Obviously, it doesn't have dash, shapes on its back, but it's an artistic choice that give it, a signature style that the artist can decide to do. All right, that's looking really good. Let's go ahead and add just a few more details to this piece. We're gonna do our mushroom stems. And I think we'll do the same, since we have it, since the stems have these dark areas, I'm gonna do that same clipping mask multiply layer thing that we did with the shell. So we're gonna tap the stem layer. So tap the stem layer and then tap the plus sign. And then we're gonna tap this new layer and choose clipping mask. Okay, so we tap the stem layer, we created a new layer, we tap this new layer, and we chose clipping mask. And now we have that arrow pointing down. And then the other step was to do set the blend mode. So we're going to tap this N, and then we're going to find multiply from the list and set the very top. Okay, a lot of steps for that one. Okay, and now I'm going to sample this color of the stem. Do a little test. I think I want to go a little bit darker. That looks good. So I just went a little bit darker than that. I'm just going to add some lines that kind of go down each of the stems just to give it, again, more texture, more personality, more interesting. And I'm using pretty like light pressure with this brush, and I'm also kind of tilting it so I get all that nice gritty tilt texture. Do this one down here too. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's finish this up. We're going to go ahead and select the layer with the face on it and just do some final little details. We're going to add some little dots on our mushrooms. We're going to have a little grass and maybe something else. Okay, so let's get like a creamy white color. So again, we're on this layer with the glasses, like the face. And now I'm going to use that same brush and I'm just going to add some little spots, like one of those red spotted mushrooms. So I'm just kind of like scribbling little dots right now, different sizes, kind of make it a little bit random. And they kind of have this nice jagged edge because of this brush. So just go ahead and add some dots to your mushroom like that, or whatever design you want. What's fun about this illustration is you could go completely different like style, colors, and everything, like with the same sketch. Do like a psychedelic mushroom or something like that. Little psychedelic snail. So yeah, go ahead and add some dots to your mushroom caps. I like to have some of the dots kind of like stick over the edge of the mushroom because then it looks like they're sitting on top of it. And we're going to add some grass down here. So let's keep using that same gritty tilt liner. I'm going to sample my green color. And then I'm going to go lighter this time. A little bit lighter. Maybe lighter than that. Maybe a little more saturated. Yeah, that's a good color. I always like to try it out. And then I might make the brush size a bit smaller, like 10%. So we've chosen a lighter green, or it's really kind of a yellowish color, but. And then I like to do these like few little sprigs of grass, these little groups of 3, just kind of here and there, just to, again, bring more texture to the piece, bring more interest to it, make it feel like it's grass. You can even make some of them in front of the snail, so it looks like he's sitting in the grass, which is nice. You can add a few of those, however much grass you want to add. There we go. Okay. And once you finish with your grass, we're really close to done. There's one more little fun detail I like to add, but we can turn off our sketch at this point. We don't really need it to be our guide anymore. So let's go ahead and do that. You're going to go up to your layers, and then we have these little checkbox on each layer. And if you uncheck it, it's going to hide that layer. So we just uncheck our sketch. It still exists, but now we can see what our piece looks like without the sketch. So it's always a good idea to make sure you turn off your sketch and see if like, oh, maybe these lines need to be a little darker or something like that. But I think we're looking pretty good here. So I'm still on the layer that we did the face and the mushroom cap little things and the grass. I'm still on that layer. And because like one of my favorite things to do in illustration is to add some little sparkle stars to it. Just kind of gives it a whimsical, magical quality. And I do that in a lot of my work. So I'm just going to grab a white color like that. You can actually double tap close to white. Works in a few different places, but if you double tap close to white, it'll snap to a pure white value. So that's a really great tip. And then add some cute little stars. I do like little six-sided stars. Maybe I'll go a little bigger with my brush. I'm at like 20, 30%. Yeah. So however many little stars you want to add. You can also do these kind of like little inverted, I don't know what to call those, little sparkles. Maybe a few more of those. It's like a diamond, but it's squished like that. A couple more over here. And then I do a couple of these like little plus sign ones, kind of do like a mix of different star shapes. So it looks nice and sparkly. Yeah. And that is the finished illustration. I hope you guys had fun with that. Did we have any questions that popped up while we were finishing this one up, Danny?
Yeah, there's a bunch of questions and some more general that I saved for the end. But first, yeah, congratulations to everyone for following along. And thank you, Lisa. That was so cool to see your drawing come together in real time. People
Yeah, it's
in the chat.
fun.
Um,
Thanks.
yeah, should we move on to more general questions?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And then we can wrap up. Um, so I have a list here. Let me pull it up. All right, cool. So one question was print quality. A few people asked about like when they, once they finish their drawing in Procreate and want to print it out, they tend to lose quality of their drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Have any suggestions on the canvas size that they should use when they're in Procreate so that when they print it out, it maintains a certain level of resolution?
Yeah, yeah. I actually have, I don't know, where are we right now? Down here on my iPad? Okay. I actually have a resource. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. I have this resolution calculator. Oops. Resolution, where you can see like what size canvas you could use for a given printed size. This is at Bardot Brush. My website's Bardot Brush, bardotbrush.com/resolution. And you can type in the width and height you want to print it. It's in inches, sorry, non-US people. You can type that in and it'll, so like, for example, if I wanted to do like 11 by 14 inch print, my canvas size I would want to use is for a 300 DPI print is 3300 by 4200 pixels. So I can print that. If I have my canvas is that size, I can print it that big. You can even print it, you can even print a smaller canvas that big, but it's not going to look as nice. So this is kind of like the ideal size or bigger. You can always go bigger with your canvas size and then print smaller. That's not a problem. But you just don't want to, have a small canvas and try to print it big. So that's a good resource for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa has a bunch of other brush packs available for sale on Skillshare.
I have them up here on, this is, if we're sharing a link or you can search for my names to find the brush packs, but all the ones that you guys have in the sample pack, the full sets are here, so you can check those out.
Cool. A couple more questions if you have time, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So a few people asked about color picking and if you have any advice about how to choose the right colors. People were trying to follow along with the colors you picked. But yeah,
Yeah.
like just general philosophies or approaches you like to use for picking colors when you're in Procreate.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes with experience. Like I have like a color palette of colors that I tend to gravitate to that isn't necessarily, I don't usually do like as muted of colors, but since it's like fall, I wanted to. So I have colors I gravitate to, but a lot of it is like when I picked a color and I swatched it to kind of see how it sat, like how it, the relationship of that color between the background and the other colors in the illustration. That's a really good way to kind of just see how things are going. And also like if you have a color palette to just start out with and just sticking to that and trying to pull colors from that. Another way that I've like learned about colors and color palettes I like is if there's like a photo or artwork or something like that that has colors I love, I'll bring it to Procreate and then like sample the colors, and you can create your own color palettes. You can like sample this color and then put it there. So you can make your own color palettes that way. That's another way. And then there's some things happening in here like there's a lot of warm colors, the reds and the pinks and things like that. And so that's why I picked blue for the shell, because it's a contrast. It's a cool color on top of warm color. So there's some like color theory stuff that is happening there. I've really been wanting to do a whole class on like colors. So hopefully you look forward to that at some point in the future, because I love color. I love talking about it. Another thing I wanted to say, like if you are sharing your artwork on like Instagram, please do tag me because I would love to see it. I'm on Instagram, Lisa Bardot, as well as Bardot Brush. So feel free to tag me in one of those or both or whatever you want. But I would love, love, love to see your guys' snail illustrations.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, some people asked about how they could share them. So Instagram with tagging is a great way, and I'll
Mhm.
share. As actually a matter of fact, I'll pull up the slide now with information for sharing. So if you want to share what you're creating, Lisa Bardot's Instagram is there. Also, please tag Skillshare. We love to repost people
Mhm.
art in the community, so you can check that out as well. One last question while we're on the
Mhm.
slide, taking down the Instagram information is, do you have any like tips around how to use layers effectively in Procreate so that it doesn't get too crazy and messy with a ton of layers, but that your drawing is kind of like well organized and you can, make updates in a cohesive way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. As you guys can see, like I tend to use a lot of layers. I try to like break up parts of my illustration into different layers, but you can kind of conserve layers by combining like things that don't touch. Like I probably could have had the shell and the mushroom caps on the same layer because they don't touch each other. Because the thing to kind of look out for is like if you plan on using like alpha lock to add texture to it, if those two things were touching, like if I tried to add texture to the shell, but it was on the same layer as the body, my blue texture would have gotten onto the, pink body. So that's why, things, you don't want things that touch to be on the same layer, things that overlap to be on the same layer. So that's something that you can do. And then as far as like organization, like you can put things into layer groups where you can swipe a bunch of layers and then you can group them and close them. So if you're like, I'm done with this part, I can group it and close it. That to kind of keep it a little bit more organized. That can help as well.
Awesome. That's super
Yeah.
helpful, Lisa.
Yeah.
Moving on to these links for all of you. Feel free to take a picture or a screen grab of these links. We have QR codes and links for all of Lisa's brushes available for sale on Procreate. So check out those brushes if you want to add more tools to your Procreate app. And then if you're not a Skillshare member, you can get a month free with this link here or QR code, and you can check out. Lisa, you have so many incredible classes on Skillshare. So if you want to
Thanks.
go deep into Procreate and learn just a ton of skills, Lisa's Skillshare account just alone is an absolutely incredible resource. And you could probably spend, I don't know what, like a full month or two just deep diving in
Yeah. Well, I have
there.
like my Kickstart Your Creativity class, which is like the best like intro to Procreate. It takes you through these like 15 to 20 minute like mini lessons that I kind of designed for you to take over the course of 4 weeks. So you can just spend, 15 or 20 minutes a day and you learn so many things about Procreate, about drawing, and all sorts of things like that. So it's a really great way to kind of introduce yourself at like a sustainable pace to kind of get you familiar with making digital art in Procreate.
Yeah, there's amazing stuff there. Thank you for making all these great classes. Uh,
Yes, you're welcome. I have fun doing it.
and yeah, I think we'll close things out. It was such a great session, and I want to thank everyone here for joining. The chat was super active and really positive, and I can tell
Oh,
people were
yay.
focused on following along and creating and Procreate. So thank you all for coming from all over the world to join us. And Lisa,
Yes,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I had a lot of fun talking about brushes. I love doing it. And thank you everybody for joining me today. I'm so excited to see your artwork. Yeah, happy art making. Bye.
Hi, everyone.